Also, thanks for joining, everybody. We're going to give just a few more minutes for a few more people to hop on. We have approximately 30 or so people that we're expecting to join us. So we just want to make sure everybody gets a moment to hop on. I want to at least wait for about the three people that messaged me saying that they were hopping on now. So I want to at least wait for them as they join. But I guess as we gear up here, so we're not all sitting in silence, how about we get to know some of the people in the room? So for everybody's knowledge, Oak is going to be our speaker. We'll give him an introduction in a second. But I do see some familiar names here on the list. Definitely want to get to know some people. Larry, how have you been so far? I know that we were chatting a little bit earlier. How's life been?
Going well, Brandon. Good to see you.
Nice to hear from you.
Yeah,
You're still at Canon, right?
still at Cannon. Still at
Perfect.
Cannon, sir. I
How have
see
things going out
by
there?
your background there, you're at your new spot.
I am, and I purposely chose this room to kind of show that.
The big
This is,
W.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's a very interesting space, and I would love to catch up. Like I said before, I'd love to catch up with you sometime, talk technology,
Sure.
procurement, and all the different things that are going on and whatnot. Because it's an interesting world of things. Did you happen to go to the ISM World Conference this year?
No, no, I was not there. I just didn't get a chance to get away. Too crazy, but I heard it was really very interesting.
I believe Eric was able to make it, right?
Yes, Eric was
Okay,
there,
perfect. I did not get the
representing
chance to
us.
run into him, but yeah, I heard about that. Nice. All right. If you don't mind, I think we have a good number of people here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, Oak, I'm going to go ahead and do the introduction, then pass it on over to you. So, first things first, welcome to the webinar, everyone. So, we are doing a webinar series with ISM called Humanizing Procurement. And if you've joined us before, you already know the story about why we're doing this. But if you haven't, I do want to tell you the purpose behind why we're doing a webinar and why we named it Humanizing Procurement. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was working at a company and my wife and I, we went on vacation together. I think we went to Florida or something like that. Had a great time. And as you know, that first day back can be a little rough. I was going through all my emails, all my messages, responding to stakeholders, catching up with everybody. And as I was responding and about to message this one particular stakeholder, and this is a woman that her and I, we kind of knew each other for a while. We've talked all the time. I knew about her kids, her family, her school plans. And we worked on several different projects together. As I was messaging her back, my manager at the time walked over to me and said, "Hey, Brandon, how's it going? How's your vacation?" We chatted for a little bit. And then he says, "Oh, I see you're messaging such and such. I won't say her name. But he says, I see that you're messaging her. I wanted to let you know that while you were on vacation, actually, she passed away. You're going to be working with Jim now." And then he walks away. And for me, it was a deeply touching moment. And he's a great guy. So nothing against him, but often in business, we do not humanize the way that we do work together. Procurement is the other half of the economy. We have the buying side and the selling side and all the stuff that happens in between. And if we could humanize that level of transactions and how we do this work, I think we're going to have a more ethical and more impactful purpose to the work that we do. So we've been going through a couple different themes overall. We've talked about HR topics and how to elevate your career. We've discussed issues in AI and how that could possibly look for replacing people and not replacing people. And today we have something special. We've invited Oaken, and I'm going to talk a little bit about him in a second, but he's actually doing something new for us. And I'm really excited to see what he has planned. I do want this to be a conversation. So, everyone, you have the ability to put in the chat any questions that come up along the way. I will be monitoring the chat and I'll make sure that we ask the questions as they come up at the appropriate moments there. With all that being said, I want you guys to be introduced to Oak. Oak is a distinguished keynote speaker at Your Leadership Legacy, known for his dynamic and inspiring presentations that focus on leadership development, organizational growth, and personal empowerment. With a passion for motivating others and a talent for delivering impactful speeches, he has established himself as a sought after speaker in the field of leadership. Oak's presentations are characterized by his practical insights, engaging narratives, and actionable takeaways that empower individuals and teams to achieve their potential. I'm super happy to have you here with us, Oak. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We have the next hour with you, and I can't wait to see what you have to tell us. So, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and mute and turn my camera off. When I do turn it back on, I'll be asking questions that the audience has submitted, and just keeping the conversation going. But with all that being said, Oak, I'll pass it on over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brandon. I appreciate you having me on the webinar today. And just so people understand that this, like he said, this is something new. I've had several people who have asked me to talk about this subject, leading through change, and I never really did. I included change in both my leadership talk and my success talk, but never specifically concentrated on change. So when Brandon asked me to do this, I was happy to do it. And so you guys are the guinea pigs. So I really do want your feedback on this as we go along, to tell me how to get better at it. So like Brandon said, this is what I do right now. I am a public speaker out there talking. Just so you get a background on me, I've got 40 years of leadership experience. 23 of that was in the Army as a combat arms officer in the Army, in the infantry and armor branch. So I've had leadership experiences in combat, peacekeeping, disaster relief. When I left the Army, I was the associate director of a food bank for a couple of years. So I've led in the boardroom. In the last 12, 13 years, I've been a government service officer at the government level leadership positions. So I've got some leadership experience, and that's what we're going to talk about today, leading through change. That's really what the topic is today. One of my favorite quotes about change is by Socrates, and he says, "The secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." And that's sometimes hard to do, especially with people who are resistant or reluctant to change. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So really what we're going to do is we're going to hit a couple things. I'm going to talk about why leadership is important in this process of change. We'll talk about what I think are the 4 phases that you need to cover when you're making changes in your organization. Then we'll talk a little bit about opposition to change and how to overcome some of that. And then I'll do some concluding thoughts, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. But by all means, if you have a question during it, like Brandon said, just put it in the chat and we'll answer those questions as we go along. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about why leadership is important during this process of change. And I want to start with some basic things about leadership that I believe about leadership over my 40 years I've learned. Number one is that leadership is about people and trust. Servant leadership is what I believe in. It's not about you, and yet it's all about you. And when I say that, people say, Colonel McCulloch, how can it not be about me and all about me? Well, it's not about you and the title you get or the privileges you get, or that you get better pay and you live in a nicer house and you get to drive a nicer car. Let's face it, leaders get those things every once in a while, and that's great, as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. If that's the only reason you want to be a leader, please go do something else, because you're not going to be a good one, at least not in my view. It's all about you and how you treat, empower the people that you have the privilege to lead, and it is a privilege to be the leader, and how you empower the organization, all to be better. And that's what leadership is about. And if you go about leadership that way, change will be a lot easier. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that as we go along. But it is about people and trust. I don't care that the principles of leadership haven't changed in 2,000 years, and they're not going to change in 2,000 years. It's about people and trust. And I kind of prove that. combat arms officer. I fought and won our nation wars. That's what I got paid to do for 23 years. When I took over as a food bank, a little different, about 180 degrees different. But I understood it was about the people and the trust. And when I took over that food bank, we were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year. When I handed it off, we were handing out 3.8 million pounds of food a year, double the size of the truck fleet and almost double the size of the workforce. And we'll talk about that. We'll use that kind of as a part of that as a way to talk about change. But it's about people and trust. If you can lead people and they trust you, then you can lead any organization and even through change. As a leader, the three things, and I want to get this out here because it's especially important in change, but it's important all the time. Three things that leaders are responsible for: the vision, the plan, and the culture of the organization. And they are tied together. I say them all three together because they have to be tied together anytime, but especially during times of change, they have to be tied together. And so the way I look at this is vision is, where do you want this organization to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, however far you want to go out. So that's where we're going. The plan is how you're going to get from where you are today to where you want to be in that vision. And the culture is who your people, your organization, and you are during that journey from where you are today to where you want to be. So they have to be tied together. If they're not tied together, you're not going to get where you want to be, and you're certainly not going to get there anytime soon. It's going to be a lot more painful than if you tie those three together. The last thing before we talk a little bit about change is three words. As I go around and talk to organizations today, and I look at the world today, I believe part of the problem is that we are using three words interchangeably, and they are not interchangeable. They are three distinct different words, and we have to understand that as leaders. Number one is accountability, authority, and responsibility. Those three words are very important as a leader, and you need to understand what they mean and why they're different. Accountability is very simple. Everybody is held accountable for what they do, don't do, what they say, their job performance, all that. You hold everybody, including yourself as the leader, accountable for everything that we do or don't do. Authority is something you have as the leader that you can give away, and you should want to give it as much authority away as you can, because when you give that authority, you're giving it so that a person that you have signed a task, a job, a mission, whatever it is, a project, whatever it is you want them to accomplish, you're giving them the authority to make it happen. And so you have to do that if you want them to do it, and do it the way they want to do it, not just the way you're telling them to do it. And the last piece, responsibility. You as the leader are responsible. You don't get to delegate responsibility. You are responsible for everything that does or does not happen in your organization. You don't get to pick and choose what you want to be responsible for. You can't say, well, that went well, I'm going to take responsibility for that. That didn't go so well, I'm going to blame somebody for that. Sorry, that's not leadership. You as the leader are responsible for everything. So just remember, as we're going through here, accountability, authority, and responsibility, and why those three things are important. So as you're navigating your team through change, I think there's three things that, and we'll cover these in depth, that you have to take into account. Number one, overcoming fear, yours and the people in your organization.
Fine.
Because we are all creatures of habit, okay? We don't like change. We don't want things to change. We want to do things the exact same way all the time.
Yes, I did see it. Yeah, I kind of reached out back. I was trying to gauge
that
on the status of that.
Absolutely true. And if you look at my experiences in that, I can tell you, this is the experience I used, the example I used. I used to live 3 blocks from where I went to work. I walked there every day. There were 3 ways I could get to work. How many ways you think I went to work every day? I went the exact same way every day. Didn't think about it. That was just habit, because we're creatures of habit. I also had an office 23 miles away that I had to go to on occasion. And on those days, I would drive to work. And I always got there early enough that I could almost always get my favorite parking spot, right in front of my door. Every once in a while, some communist would get there before me and they would take my parking spot and I'd have to park somewhere else. When I walked out of the office to go to my car, where did I walk to? I walked to my favorite parking spot, even though I wasn't parked there, because we are creatures of habit. So you're going to have to overcome that fear of change in people and in yourself. Don't be afraid to change yourself, and we'll talk more about that. Then you got to be transparent throughout the entire process, and we'll go into a lot of depth about that because that's huge. If you're going to overcome that fear, you got to be transparent with people. Otherwise, you're never going to overcome that fear. And the last piece is joint ownership. Got to get buy-in, and we'll talk about that as well. You, as the leader, have to be, you got to lead that organization to the change that you want to see. It won't just happen on its own. You're the leader, are responsible for making sure that it happens. And the people who work for you are going to take their cue from you. If you're doing it well, then they're going to be confident about that. So let's go through those 4 things that I think, the 4 phases that you have to do. Number 1 is determine the need for a change. And that sounds simple, but sometimes that isn't quite as simple. You know, as a good leader, you're looking down the road, that vision piece. You're looking down the road, looking for what is coming towards you, that you're going to have to make some changes. And changes are just a fact of life. Any organization that doesn't change doesn't stay in business very long. You can look back through history. The organizations that resisted change aren't around anymore. So you got to figure out what those changes are. So to do that, you have to first assess the situation as it is today. Any leader that you know of that comes in and starts changing things day one, unless it's a safety issue, a lawful issue, morals, ethics, those kinds of things, you got to change those right away. I got that. And I've been in those situations. But just to change things, if somebody's coming in and changing things and they don't even know anything about the organization, they're not making changes for that organization. They're doing it for their ego. Be very wary of those type of leaders, because they're not in the best interest of that organization. So assess where you are today and what you think is coming that's going to make you make changes, and then start figuring that piece out. And we'll talk about that during the preparing and planning phase. Then pinpoint issues and opportunities that are going to help you make those changes or be more productive in the future. And I always like to use a SWOT analysis when I do that. That's my favorite method. There's other methods out there and you can figure out what works best for you. But SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. If you go through a good SWOT analysis, every so often, you'll start seeing some of those threats out there that you're going to have to make changes for. And it may be something that is in your strength. It may be something in your weakness, but those opportunities to make the changes so that the threat isn't as bad for your organization. The only way you're going to get there is to periodically do that SWOT analysis and try to figure those things out. Then once you figure out that you're going to have to make changes, then you got to figure out what leadership style how you're going to lead that organization through that. And there's a bunch of different things. There's 4 different ways that I think you're going to have to ways that you lead that you're going to have to use. And just keep in mind, when I talk about these 4, you may use all 4 of these throughout that change process. And you may use some of them on for some people, but not for other people, depending on where they are in their profession. So I think the 4 that you got to think about when you're thinking about how you want to lead is, number 1, directing. And that might be one that you use in the first phase, the first phase of the change, because you're kind of directing what it is you want changed, and they may need to know that a lot more information and a lot more of your input during the initial phases of the change. So directing, coaching. And so once you get them so they know what it is you want, then you kind of coach them. You take a step back and you let them do some things on their own. Again, give them some authority so that they can make decisions without you standing right over them, telling them what you want done and when you want it done and how you want it done. So coaching, then supporting them. When they come back to you and say, hey, boss, I'm at this point and I need more money. I need more people. I need more resources. Then that's your job as the leader, is to help support them through that process, giving them what they need to make your dream, your vision, your goals come true. And then the last piece is delegating and allowing people to do what it is that they are good at. You know, I think it was the guy who Apple, the guy who was the Apple leader. He said one time, he said, why, Steve Forbes, he said, why would you hire the best people and then tell them what to do? Delegate. And the analogy I always use for that, throughout this process, the goal is to let them start using their talents, their skills and abilities. And the analogy I always use is, if we got to get to 9, the number 9, how do we care how we get to 9? 7 plus 2 is 9, but so is 5 plus 4 and 6 plus 3 and 8 plus 1. I don't care how you get to 9 as the leader. I want you to get to 9. And if you do it, if you look at it that way, then you start to delegate things, give away authority, start delegating, and people start making changes, and they start doing things on their own. So they're using their skills, their abilities, their knowledge to get things done, not just what your knowledge is. So figure out what you need to do leadership wise at different points in the change process and with different people based on where they are in their profession. Again, you may have to use all 4 all at once or at different times. But I had a boss one time who retired a 3-star general, and he said, Oak, if you continue to do things the same way that you've always done them, you're going to continue to get the same result. If you want change, you're going to have to make changes. So just be prepared to do that. I think Brandon, did somebody have a question?
Nope, I am putting a few notes in the chat just
okay, good.
So that people can follow along. So what I did there, and for those of you that are not watching the chat, I just put his 4 points in there. And just to quickly recap, determine the need for change, pinpoint the opportunities that will help the desired changes happen, and know your SWOT results, and then choose the leadership style to address that specific situation, provide the proper coaching and support, and then lastly, delegate and trust your people, give them the freedom and flexibility to perform the way that they see fit.
Good. So let's go to the second phase of change that I believe you have to go through, and that's preparing for the change. Because if you aren't preparing, then preparing to be successful, then you're preparing to fail. I promise you. You got to do the preparation piece of it. And the number one piece of that preparation is the communication. That is what leaders do. If you can't communicate what it is you want done, then how do you expect the people that are working for you on your team and in your organization to take you there? So you got to communicate the vision. What is it that I'm asking for? And it's got to be articulate. You got to really tell them what they want, what it is you want, so that they understand what it is that you want. How many in here have ever asked somebody for giving somebody a project, and you ask them for something, and they work on it and they work on it and they bring it back to you, and you look at it and you say, yeah, that's not what I asked for. I promise you, 90% of the time, it is exactly what you asked for. It is just not, it's not what you wanted, but it is exactly what you asked for. You didn't do a good job of communicating exactly what it is that you wanted. So you got to communicate very clearly what your vision is. Then you got to get buy-in. If you are trying to make a change and the people who are working on your team haven't bought into it, you're going to have a hard time making that happen. So you got to get buy-in. Talk to them, communicate with them, have daily meetings. Where are we? What are your ideas? What's your thoughts on this? Use the people that you have on your team and communicate with them. It has to be an open dialogue, two-way street. You can't just be you talking to people. You have to listen to people as well if you really want them to buy in. And again, it needs to be very clear what it is you want. that old adage that if it can be misunderstood, it will be, is absolutely true. So make sure that it's clear. And you got to align those goals and objectives with the organization, because, the culture of the organization, because you don't want to try to do something that doesn't fit the culture of the organization. Again, you're asking for a disaster to happen. Because you've spent a lot of time and effort building that culture. You don't want to undermine it just for a simple change that maybe that you could have made that change inside the culture. So the three things that you really have to communicate to people is really simple, but I think a lot of people don't think about it. The why, which is the purpose for the change, make them understand why we have to change. Because again, that helps you get the buy-in with them. If they understand why we have to make this change, even though we don't like change, we'll understand why it is we have to change. Number two is the how, and that's the process. How are we going to make this change? And that may take some additional training. You may be asking them to change something and do something that they're not trained for. And so you're going to have to do some training to get them ready, that preparation for the change that's coming, for the process that you're going to implement. And don't try to implement that process until the people are trained to do what it is you want them to do to standard. Because if you do, you're just asking for failure. Again, you're setting them up for failure if you haven't trained them to the standard that you want when they go through this process. And then the last piece is the what. What's the outcome? At the end of the day, what do I want this to look like? In the Army, we called that the commander's intent. At the end of this mission, at the end of the day, what does the picture look like? The big picture. And if you can communicate that, the why, the how, and the what, then you're going to get some buy-in with the people that have to make it happen for you. Because again, if you think as the leader, you're going to get your organization through this change by yourself, you're sadly mistaken. The people who work for you, the people you are leading, are the ones that are going to get you there. So they have to understand what it is that you're asking for very clearly. Then you got to motivate the people for that change. You got to motivate people. That's part of a leader's job anytime, but it is certainly important during change to keep people motivated. And so you got to figure out how you're going to do that. Is it going to be with rewards and punishment? Is it going to be with recognition? Is it going to be with appealing to their emotion? And I've used that. When I was working at the food bank, when I was in the Army, motivating people was really simple. We support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We defend the American way of life. Let's go win this war, this battle. Easy, done. That didn't work at the food bank. Not quite the same. And I struggled a little bit trying to figure out how I was going to motivate these people. Because I had a vision that we were going to double the size, and we actually tripled this amount of food that we were handing out. But I had a vision when I took over that we wanted to double it. And so I figured out one day I was in a meeting, and we were talking about this food handout that we were going to do that we did every year. And it was the largest food handout we did. And about 4 o'clock, everybody started closing their notebooks and getting ready to leave. And we weren't done with the meeting. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, it's 4 o'clock. It's time to go home. And I said, but we're not done. And they said, but it's 4 o'clock. And I said, okay, go. If you want to leave, leave. But let's make this very clear. 3 weeks from now, when we hand out this food and some 19-year-old unmarried young lady has to go home and can't feed her 2-year-old daughter because we didn't get this right, it's our fault.
So the final count is going to be 7
How many people you
people.
think left?
And
Zero.
I think what we're going to do
So
is
you can use a motion.
Hold up, but do you have like our
You
food
can use a
section or
motion
anything like that?
to get them motivated if that is appropriate. But you got to figure out what it is
yeah,
that's
hold on,
appropriate to get them motivated with. So motivate the people that you are getting ready to lead through this change. The other part of motivating, again, is to be very honest and transparent throughout. Be honest. Change isn't easy. And be honest with them. Look, this isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. We're going to have problems, but we're going to make this happen. And then be honest as you go along. If something doesn't go as well as you thought it would, hey, I'm responsible. I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I did something and it wanted something done and it didn't work. Let's try to find some other way to do it. but be upfront and honest and transparent with them through their entire process, and you will motivate them. And then the last piece about motivating them is be a problem solver. None of us like to work for people who are indecisive. We all have, and it doesn't give you any faith in that person or the organization. So be a problem solver. When conflicts or issues come up, be proactive. Right away, go and try to solve that problem immediately. The sooner the better, so that we can move on to the next thing. And there'll be other problems that are going to come up, and that's okay. When they come up, then deal with them. And be decisive. Make a decision. When a decision has to be made, be decisive. One of the things I've learned in leadership and watching people lead is that some people have a hard time making a decision, and it's horrible. And when I ask people why you didn't make a decision in this situation, I almost always get the same result, same answer. They say, I didn't have enough information. Well, I'm sorry, but that world where you have all the information you need to make a decision, that place is called fantasy land. That place doesn't exist, okay? You're almost never going to have all the information. You know what you know what you don't know, or you have an idea what you don't know. And then you make some guesses about that, and you make a decision. You can always make changes, fix things as things come up, as you get more information or results come in. But you got to make a decision and start down that road, whether it's change or not, but especially if you're trying to change something, because the longer you put it off, the more difficult it's going to be. And just keep this in mind when you're talking about preparation. If you're managing change, you're already behind the power curve. You should be as the leaders, you should be the one dictating the change, figuring out what it is we have to do, preparing for it, and making it happen. Because if you're waiting for other people to tell you what the change has to be, then you're already behind the power curve, and you're not doing your organization any service. So that's the second phase of leading through change, preparing for the change, and making sure your organization's ready to take on that challenge. And it is a challenge, no doubt about it. The third phase of leading through change is to execute the plan. So take that SWOT analysis that you went through and the SMART goals that you came up with, the things that you got to do to make that happen, and then execute it. Allocate the suitable resources for it: time, people, money, equipment, and make sure that you're not on the cheap. Because when I see people fail and change, a lot of times they try to do it very cheaply. And you got to make sure you got the right resources for the people that are making those changes to make it happen. Then you got to give them that authority. Again, back to that word, authority. I've given you all these resources. I've put you in charge of this part of that change process. I got to give you the authority for the people who are working under you to make it happen. So give that authority, whatever that takes. And then when they're accomplished with that, maybe you take that authority back from them and give it to somebody else that you've assigned a new task for. But you got to give them the authority to make it happen, or they're just going to sit back and wait for you to tell them what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And that is going to end in disaster for you, I promise. You don't have enough time of your own to do that through a change process. Not at all. You got to use those talents of the people on your team. And then you got to adapt to the adjustments. You're going to try things. You're going to implement things that aren't going to work. And that's okay. We're going into uncharted territory. We're changing for a reason. We got to change, but we don't really know the path for that. We can come up with a plan of what we think, but there's always going to be things out there that you don't know about. There's going to be obstacles that you don't foresee. There's going to be different things that happen that you're going to have to adapt and change things as you go along. So be flexible. If you cannot be rigid, you cannot be a rigid leader during change. You have to be flexible and make changes along the road as you're going along, because things are going to come up that are going to require you to make changes, I promise. Then you have to ensure quality and effectiveness. You still got to meet those standards that you the people who are your stakeholders, the bosses above you, and your customers still expect. So you got to, again, that goes back to the preparing. You've trained people to make that happen to a standard, and now you hold people to a standard, hold them accountable. Back to one of those 3 words. You hold them accountable for what it is that you've asked them to do. And you expect them to at least meet the bare minimum of the expectation. Hopefully they go above that, but they got to at least meet the bare minimum. You know, and when you're planning things, you're never going to come to 100% solution. Very seldom will you come to the 100% solution. And, you know, being a military guy, one of my favorite guys in the generals in the American Army was General George Patton. And when he would talk about plans, he'd say a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. Now, I got it. We're not talking about violence here, but you can say vigorously or, you know, immediately, whatever adjective you want to use, but you have to do it. Don't wait. Let's get to the 75% solution, and then let's start the process. Again, we can make changes as we go along the way, but we got to at least start down that road. Because the longer you wait, if you wait too long, the change doesn't even matter because you're already overcome by events. But if you wait, the longer you wait, the harder it is going to be to make those changes. So come up with the 75% solution and start down that road. You can always refine it as you go along. The 4th phase of change, in my opinion, is evaluating the change. How did we do? And I think you got to measure those things. You know, anything that's not measured really doesn't matter. So you got to measure against standards that your organization has, whether it's a product that you're putting out or whether it's interaction with the audience that you're doing, you know, that you have, clients, whatever your profession is, there are ways that you measure how effective you are being. And you got to continue to measure those things, this new change. What was it like before the change? And what is it like today? And is it what we expected from that change? Because it may not be. It may be better, it may be worse. And if it's worse, then you got to reevaluate. Are we done? Have we done a good job with this change, or is there something else that we need to do? So measure constantly. Keep a good measuring stick there to measure where you're at. Then you have to assess. Again, are we better? Was the change successful? So assess it, and if it wasn't, then make changes to it. Here's the part that I think a lot of people forget. Recognize the performance of people on your team. I'm a huge believer that you give credit where credit's due. I worked for a boss one time, and he assigned my organization something, and we did it. We knocked it out of the ballpark, did a great job. And I actually heard him go to his boss and say, "Hey, boss, look what I just did." And I thought, yeah, I thought my guys did that. You know, that doesn't make people motivated. It doesn't make them want to work any harder for you. So give credit where credit is due. My philosophy has always been this: if we accomplish what we were supposed to, I went to my boss in public, preferably in front of my people, and said, "Hey, boss, look what my guys and gals did. And oh, by the way, John, Jane, and Joe did a great job today." If we didn't do what we were supposed to do, then I go to my boss in public and say, "Hey, boss, I messed up." Responsibility. There you go. I messed up, and this is how we're going to fix it. And then you go back, even if I wasn't the one who messed it up. Again, I'm the leader. I'm responsible for everything that does or doesn't happen in my organization. And I let my people know that I'm responsible, and this is how we're going to fix it. Now, that you still hold people accountable. And if somebody screwed up that kept you from meeting your objective, then they have to be held accountable for that. Absolutely. But you're the one responsible. So give credit where credit's due. And then constantly check on things and get feedback from people. If you're not going out there and checking, I promise you, a lot of people are just going back to doing it the same way they've always done it, because that's human nature. That's what we do. And if you're not getting feedback, then you're wasting an opportunity, because they're the ones that are doing what it is you're asking them to do. Get their feedback. Is it working? Is there something else that I can do to help you make it even better? Is there something that you need to accomplish what it is we're asking you to accomplish now that we've made changes. So get their feedback. Again, communication is a two-way street. It's not just you talking all the time. You got to listen. And never, ever, ever accept the answer that that's the way we've always done it. If somebody tells you that's a lazy person or somebody who doesn't want to change. So never accept that answer from somebody. Now, if they told me, sir, that's the way we've always done it and it works because of this, then I'm going to believe you until I can prove you otherwise. But never accept that answer. Make them tell you why we do it the way we do it. And especially after you've made changes, that has to really be the motto is, why are we doing it the way we're doing it? And make them understand why it is. Because if they don't understand it, they're going to go right back to doing it the way they've always done it. So that's the 4 phases. You want to take a break there, Brandon, or you want me to continue on?
Actually, I want to take a second to ask a few questions, if you don't
Sure.
mind. As you're going through all this, and I just put another comment in there because you're talking about all sorts of wonderful things that leaders need to know and understand. Earlier this week, and for those of you that don't know, I'm also an instructor with ISM, and I'm able to work with all sorts of different companies on either helping them with a specific procurement related task or get certified. So earlier this week, I was in Pueblo, Colorado, which is pretty close to Denver, Colorado, and working with a company called GCC. They just finished up their 3rd module with going through the CPSM exam course. So their entire team is about to get certified. And the reason I bring that up is because the 3rd module is all about leadership. And some of the things that you're talking about, Oak, are directly related to the principles of leadership that we were kind of walking through within an ISM course. And so when I think about things like group thinking and pretty much having these people that are on the lagging side of change management, I often think, how do we get around some of those obstacles? So my question to you then, Oak, is the first part is a 2-part question. What are the typical obstacles that you see for leaders when they're trying to make change within their organization? And then how do you recommend they get over those obstacles?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things, one of the obstacles that leaders run into or mistakes they make is that they think they have to own everything, the whole process, that they micromanage it because they don't think that their people either aren't good enough or don't understand it. And if they don't understand it, then that's your fault. If they're not good enough, then that's your fault because you didn't train them well enough. But I see a lot of people during change want to hang on to all that authority, and that stifles all creativity. I had a boss one time who told me he'd retired a 3-star general, and he said, Oak, leadership is on a scale, and on this end of the scale, you have that authoritarian micromanaging, do it as I tell you to do it leader, and on this end of the scale, you have Attila the Hun and chaos. And he said, and you want to be as far down that chaos scale as you can get, controlled chaos, but chaos. And he said, and the way you do that is you give people the vision. This is what I want. You train them to a standard. You give them the resources. You give them the authority, and then you get out of their way. And let them use their skills, knowledge, abilities to do what it is that you're asking them to do. And you'll be absolutely amazed at what they do. So don't stifle the creativity of the people in your organization. The other piece of that is that leaders think they have to come up with the plan, that they're the only person who knows what the plan's got to look like. And I'm absolutely against that. When I have a problem, an issue, or I got to make a change, then I call my junior leaders together and I say, okay, guys and gals, this is what we got to do. Give me some ideas. Let them throw out ideas to you. Well, a couple things are going to happen when you do that. Number one, you're going to find out that the person you think is the strongest person on your team will every once in a while throw out a horrible idea. And the person that you think might be the weakest person on your team, every once in a while is going to throw out a great idea. You never know. I had a boss one time who said, Oak, a good idea is a good idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. And a bad idea is a bad idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. So let them throw it out there. When I do that, I find a couple things happen. Number one, you're building trust with them. even stronger than what you might have had before, because you've asked them their opinion. Even if you don't use their opinion on this specific case, you asked their opinion. So you're building trust. And number two, what I have found happens is that I'll use a little bit of Brandon's ideas, a little bit of Larry's ideas, a little bit of Maya's ideas, and then a little bit of mine, and we'll put that together, and that becomes the solution. When you do that, it is no longer Colonel McCulloch's solution. It is our solution. They have buy-in. They have skin in the game. Now there's a reason they want it to be successful, because they had input into it. And they're the experts anyway. They're the ones who are going to do it for you. So use their experience, knowledge, and abilities as much as possible. Don't put all the onus on you to come up with the perfect plan.
Was wonderful, Oak. I really do appreciate that. And to me, you're getting at some of the primary principles of leadership that are applicable in pretty much any industry. What I do want to do is talk about the emerging leader side of leadership. A couple of weeks ago, we had the ISM World Conference, and I was on a panel that talked about how can leadership shape the next generation of emerging leaders, like what do they care about and whatnot. And one of the things that came up was exactly what you said. You need to give the next generation of emerging leaders advocacy, and transparency throughout the process. You need to be able to put them in positions where they can succeed, fail, all of that, right? So my question to you kind of focuses in on, what do you feel the leaders of today need to focus on to build up the leaders of tomorrow?
Yeah, a great question. And I addressed that in my leadership talk. And, my book that I wrote, it's called Your Leadership Legacy. And because that is, to me, that's your legacy. Legacy has two parts. Very small part of your legacy is what you actually accomplished. And I say that because, it is a little part of it, because in the real world, results do matter. Maybe in fantasy land where everybody's a winner and everybody gets a trophy, maybe not. But in the real world where we work and live, results do matter. So a small part of that is your results of what you actually accomplished as a leader. Because if you're putting all of your legacy on that, when you leave and the next leader comes in, and that's going to happen, and they change everything, then where's your legacy? Mm-hmm. It's his or her legacy. It's not yours anymore. The largest part of your legacy is the next generation of leaders that you helped produce. They're going to carry on those things, those ideas, those principles that you found that you think are important for a leader to do. They're the ones that are going to carry those on. And not just in that organization, but in any organization that they go to. So you may be affecting dozens of organizations with your legacy by passing it on to that next generation. Couple of things I tell people. Number one, make young leaders responsible. Put them in leadership positions, whether they want them or not. And I always tell young leaders, you should never, ever turn down a leadership position. That is your opportunity to learn, because we can bring 1,000 leadership experts in here and talk all day for a month, and you can learn everything they have to offer. But until you put it into practice, it's knowledge, and knowledge isn't leadership. You got to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what worked for the organization you're in and doesn't work for that organization, because it will change as you move through from organization to organization or from profession to profession. The principles of leadership don't change. How you implement them and how you communicate them certainly do. So you got to figure that piece out. So make them be leaders. Great leaders want to be leaders all the time. I want to be the leader all the time. I don't care what it is I'm doing. I want to be the leader. Now, I know when I come home at night and I walk in my front door, I know I'm not the leader anymore, okay? I know my place in my house, and there's a reason I've been happily married for 37 years. But when I walk out tomorrow morning, I want to be the leader again. So make people want to be leaders and make them lead so that they learn. Then you got to have a professional development program, a leadership development, professional development program for everybody in your organization. Even those people who say they may not want to be a leader, you still got to, the more you develop them professionally and in leadership, the stronger your organization is going to be. Even if they're never in a leadership position in your organization, that knowledge of what it takes to be a leader and what to expect from leaders, it will only make your organization stronger. So you got to have that. And here's why it's important that you do that. Because if I just joined your organization as a brand new 18, 19, 21-year-old, and I have aspirations to be a leader in your organization, and you aren't showing me a path forward to get there, then I'm leaving your organization and I'm going to one that does. And you're losing your top talent because you didn't provide them a way forward to be a leader. And I got it. Money gets tight, and money's tight right now. I got that. What's the first two things that get cut when money gets tight in an organization? Professional development and training. Probably the two worst things that you can cut, because that's what's going to get you through the hard times. The training and the professional development, producing that next generation of leaders.
Exactly. So, Oak, you're saying so many things that I'm directly relating to. I hear you. This is awesome for me. Congrats on over 30 years of marriage. I definitely understand that too. I'm 6 years happily married, and that's the only boss I have in my life, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.
But you also said some other really, really interesting things, in my opinion. And also, we have Isaac Lowry that just joined, and I remember meeting him in person at the ISM conference. And one of the things that I won't put you on the spot, Isaac, but we were having this conversation. I don't know if I said it to him at the time, but he talked to me about his aspirations, right? He said, here are the leadership positions I want to be in. Here are the things that I want to do. And I thought back to myself and some of the people that I've mentored as an example. And I thought the best way for them to achieve their goals is to actually vocalize and socialize those goals.
Yeah.
If I'm your leader, if I'm your manager, there's no way I can help you unless I know that you want to be helped. So I want to switch the conversation because we only have about 7 minutes or so left. People ask questions in the chat if you would like. But my one of my big questions here is going to be advice for the next generation of leaders. How, in other ways, because you already touched on a few, like take the leadership positions, make sure that you're joining an organization with a leadership development program. What other pieces of advice can you give to people where if I'm new to the field, new to the space, here are things that I can do to put myself in a leadership position in the near future? Like, what do I have to do to get into that management and to get into the next step? And then the quick thing I will add for everybody is you don't need to be a people leader to be a leader. You can be a functional leader. You can be a facilitator. You
There's
can
all
be
kinds of
project leaders. Exactly. So kind of keeping that in mind, Oak, what would you say to somebody who's saying, I need more leadership opportunities. I want to move up in my organization and do better. Where should I start?
Yeah. So, and the other piece of that, all the different types of leaders, you don't need a title to be a leader either. And that, sometimes the people who don't have the title, who are leaders, get recognized, get noticed, and then people start paying attention to them and then start grooming them for leadership positions. So never turn down a chance to be the leader, even if you don't get the title for it or you're not getting the extra pay. Your good work will eventually pay off most of the time. So a couple things. I think you hit it right on the head. If I'm your leader and I don't know what you want, what your goal is, then how can I help get you there? And so I think the onus is on both the leader and the person that works for that leader to make that known. And this is the way that I'm a firm believer and I've always used. I believe in counseling on a regular basis. And I put it in writing. Okay, here's what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me. These are the goals that we got to do. And then in the bottom of that, the last thing I say is, okay, especially an in brief, when somebody's first coming on board, I say, what is your goals? Where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And I put that in writing right on this initial counseling. And then every quarter when I counsel people, I say, okay, here's where you said you wanted to be 5 years from now. Where are we on this process? What are the things that we said we had to do to get you there that we're doing well? And what are the things that we're not doing well? And you got to be upfront and honest with your boss, saying if they're not providing what you think you need to make that move, then you got to tell them. They may tell you, too bad, I can't do that right now. That we may have to push that down the road a little bit. Or they may say, okay, I just didn't realize that I wasn't providing that. So let's fix that. So the communication piece of it is huge. because as a leader, you got to know your people. If you don't know your people, then how do you know what they want, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, all that kind of stuff. So that piece of it. Then the other piece is I always tell young men and women, look, even if an organization has a professional development and a leadership development program, the onus is still on you to help develop yourself. Go out and on top of those things, figure out what you can do. Do more reading. And I'm a huge fan of reading autobiographies of leaders, because of great leaders, because then not only do you learn what they did, but you learn the thought process that they went through making decisions. Now, are you ever going to have to make that exact same decision? No, but you know the thought process in making that decision. So you may be able to use that same thought process. So read autobiographies. Never turn down a chance to read anything about leadership. I don't care if it's a bulletin, a blog, an article, whatever. If there's something about leadership that pertains to you and your profession, then you need to read those things. And then, like I said, take every opportunity that you can to be the leader. Volunteer to be the leader of things. And if you do those two things, you're honest with your boss where it is you want to be, you take personal responsibility for your leadership and professional development as well, which includes reading and hands-on stuff, then I think you're on the right track.
Last quick question here, Oak. What is the primary mistake that young leaders or people aspiring to be leaders need to avoid? What is that big mistake, the big red flag that would stop them in their tracks from their mission to leadership?
My personal opinion is that they forget that it's not about them. They focus on their goal, where they want to be, and they forget that there's other people around them that can help get them there, and that they got to help as well, because it's a two-way street. So understand it's about networking. It's about helping other people, because if you help somebody, they're more likely to help you. And just understand, remember, just like in the first thing I talked about, it's not about you, not entirely all about you. It is about everybody on the team, making the team better. So I think, you got to understand that you're not in it just for yourself. And if you are, then I don't want you on my team. Understand that you're there to help other people and they'll help you. So I think the networking piece of it I always tell CEOs, presidents of organizations, you want to develop a community in your organization. You don't want people who just come to work their 8 hours, draw a paycheck, and go home, and don't know anybody else in the organization. And there are plenty of organizations like that, and they're horrible to work at, and they aren't very effective. You want to build that community of people who know each other, want to help each other, and want to make the organization better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Oak. We really do appreciate the time with you. This has been a fantastic 1 hour that we were able to spend. How can people keep up with you and follow you moving forward?
So I have a website, www.ltcoakmcculloch.com. And on my website, it has my social media, links to my social media. It has my cell phone, has my email. Would love to have you go to and send me a feedback for this, because like I said, this is the first time I've given this talk. So I'd love to get your feedback so I can make it better for the next time I do it. And if you want me to come speak at your organization at an event, we hop on an email and we'll start talking about that. But just go to social media, and Brandon and I got connected on LinkedIn. That's the social media I use most. And I'm sure most people on
Do you
here
mind
do.
throwing your website in the chat? If
Yeah.
you don't mind, Oak?
I'll do that. And if you just want to talk about something that I talked about today and get deeper into it, or ask my opinion on something, I'm always happy to connect with people.
Wonderful.
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll make sure we get that. And then for the people that had to jump off a little bit early, we'll make sure that we send that link out. But Oak, one last time, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. This has been a fantastic lunch hour for the most of us. And I guess we'll get back to it, but we'll love to continue to follow your journey and really appreciate all of the wisdom and insight that you had to share. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, Brandon.
Have a good day.